Thank you, sir. Next is the keynote address by Professor Yu Longyu, Director, Center for Indian Studies, Shenzhen University. One of China's foremost scholars, Professor Yu has played a key role in deepening academic exchanges between India and China. He is also a recipient of the Distinguished Indologist Award from the President of India. Sir, the stage is yours.
感谢大使先生。接下来是深圳大学印度研究中心主任郁龙瑜教授发表主旨演讲。郁教授是中国的杰出学者之一，在深化中印学术交流方面发挥了关键作用。从荣获印度总统颁发的印度杰出学家奖项，有请郁教授。
Today, I'm so excited to attend this symposium. It is beyond my expectation. I'm meeting many of my old friends that I haven't met for a long time, especially Professor Zhang Baosheng from the Peking University. He's a graduate from Mr. Ji Xianlin's first class of Sanskrit language. He's already 88 years old, and from that class we only have three graduates still alive, and he has received many honors. His career demonstrates that Chinese scholars are loving the Indian culture and Indian classicals so much. Now I would like to start my keynote speech. First, I would like to thank Ambassador Rawat for organizing such a brilliant event. It will go down in history with its own name because it is an important symposium for scholars. I was invited as the keynote speaker. At first, I was a bit humbled because I'm not an expert on the Indian philosophy, but over the decades of research, I got exposure to some Indian philosophy, and that limited exposure made me realize that to understand the Indian philosophy is very challenging. It is so rich. So here I would like to share with you some of my studies on the chapter 6 of my research project. It's about the introduction to the study of Indian philosophy. And here I'm joined by Dr. Zhu Xuan. Dr. Zhu Xuan had her master's degree with me and then had a PhD from Peking University. Her specialty is in Indian philosophy, and she is the key writer for this chapter 6 of my project. I will just give you a brief introduction to that. For the chapter, it starts with an untitled brief preface. The preface serves as an introduction to the contents of this chapter. And I will not elaborate on too much details. I can share with you my speech draft, and later we'll publish this special chapter, and I can hand out those treatises as a gift to you. I would rather like to talk about the conclusions of this chapter. So Dr. Zhu Xuan, after summarizing all the Indian philosophy, schools, and their thoughts, she also included a conclusion in which we made the point that India is a great civilization with a very rich historical legacy. Only in the field of philosophy we have sufficient materials to explore. If you are interested, you are more than welcome to study and to inherit the legacy.
Second, China is a neighboring country of India with a population of more than 1.4 billion. Chinese scholars since ancient time has been really interested in Indian philosophy. In other words, China has been translated more collections and books and articles of Indian philosophy than all the other countries. We all know that China has great civilization, and one of the reasons is that we have been absorbing a lot of nourishment from other civilizations, including Indian culture. You may know Tai Xu, who is a master of Buddhism in China. In 1804, he visited Calcutta's International University, founded by Tagore. And he said that in China we have Confucianism, we have Taoism, and we have Buddhism. And at the same time, we also have hundreds of schools of philosophy and thought in China. In modern China, the top scholars in our country, they share something in common. And I did a research of all the scholars actually. For example, Cao Youwei, Liang Qichao, Mr. Sun Yamsan, and the Master Hu Shi, all of the best scholars in China, they shared one thing in common. That they had really a good understanding of Chinese culture, Western culture, and also Indian culture. So, for a scholar in contemporary China, it's okay for you to just understand Chinese and Western civilizations, but if you want to be the best, you need to understand India, because without a good understanding of India, you can't be the top scholar in the academic community. I have done a research and an investigation. I think it's not a secret anymore. Even if a lot of people don't know that all the top scholars in China know a lot about India. And I believe that in Indian stories, we can also discover the essence of Indian philosophy. Everybody knows Mr. Jisanling and why he was so famous. He translated a lot of Indian stories like Mahabharata. He translated the epic into Chinese, and he translated a lot of Buddhist stories. And one of the most popular stories, which is even more popular than the Bible, it's called the 5 volumes book, translated by Mr. Jisanling. It's still really popular in China. Last night, the head of the Institute of Jisanling in Beijing and also an editor of the publication house sent me the new version of the Panchadra. So he wanted me to also resend this book to our ambassador. The reason why that it's so popular is because the Panchadra is because the stories were really compelling, and in ancient China, Han Yu was a really important scholar and official and poet in Chinese history, and also Liu Jian, a poet, academic scholar, and also an official in ancient China. They were really important in the history of Chinese literature. In one article called 前如之际, there is a Chinese idiom which is related to the story. Actually, the story was inspired by the Panchen Tantra, meaning that in ancient times, China and India have already been interacting with each other. So apart from like Upanishads and all the other classics, I think we should also discover more interesting elements from Indian stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yu. Now, a video keynote message by scholar Dr. Jiang Jingqi, Professor and Dean, Institute for International and Area Studies, Tsinghua University. Professor Jiang has translated and edited several important Hindi texts into Chinese and has guided generations of students in the study of Indian culture. Although Dr. Jiang could not join us in person today due to prior academic commitments, he has kindly shared his thoughts through this recorded message.
谢谢于教授。现在我们将播放清华大学国际地区研究院院长江景奎教授的视频致辞。江教授曾将多部重要的印度语文献编译为中文，指导了众多学生从事印度文化研究。由于日程冲突，江教授无法亲临现场，但他特地录制了视频，与大家分享他的见解。
Adherneer scholars, Korean dost, Namaste. Many thanks for the kindest invitation. Due to prior commitments, I'm unable to be with you in person today and can only accept my greetings via video. Please allow me to offer my heartfelt congratulations on the convening of this conference and to express my respect to you all. Today, I would like to share a brief observation related to mutual learning among civilizations, drawing on my own research. Chinese and Indian civilizations are two of the world's great civilizations. Exchange between them have a long and continuous history. It is widely accepted that this exchange goes back to about 2,000 years ago. In fact, if we investigate more deeply, the exchange well beyond 2,000 years indeed. One could say 4,000 years or even longer. Rather than revisiting the well-known chapters of the history, I would like to focus on a case that recently caught my attention. In studying the culture of Gangrenboqi, Mount Kailash in Xizang, China, I encountered a particularly intriguing phenomenon within the Bon religion of the Gangrenboqi culture. There is the worship of Mahadeva. In Bon context, Mahadev is counted as one of the 360 forms of Vajinkaku, who is himself an avatar of Shalavagar, the original creator deity of the divine realm. Please note, an avatar of an avatar. Mahadev upholds justice among humans, safeguards the daily life of herdsmen, and protects animals. Just for example, what is even more interesting about the Mahadev in the Bon religion is not his name, but also its iconography. He is depicted wearing a tiger skin, often in a dancing posture, and his mount, Vahan, is a blue bull. If we take to Hinduism, Shiva likewise bears the title Mahadeva. And both figures are upholders of justice in the human realm and protectors of animals. As we know, Shiva is called Pashupati, Lord of Beasts. In fact, the Mahadev in the Bon religion is likewise portrayed as continuously safeguarding the reproduction and flourishing of animals. If we push further along the timeline and textual lineage, certain clues emerge. In the Bon religion, Mahadev can be traced in the literature to around 1800 BCE. As for Shiva's title Mahadev in Hindu term, the extant textual evidence points to the late Vedic period, appearing in the Atharvaveda Samhita. That is, from about 1200 to 1000 BCE. Additional narratives are found in the two great epics and in the various Puranas that followed. Because our grasp of the available sources is still limited, and archaeological work may remain incomplete, we cannot yet say who influenced whom. Although, based on the current materials, the Mahadev in the Bone religion appears earlier than that in the Hindu term, we are not yet in a position to claim direct relationship between the two. Nevertheless, the iconography, functions, deeds, and mounts in both cases all point to a noteworthy fact. Both China's Bone religion and Indian Hindu tradition venerate a figure known as Mahadev. This is highly intriguing. This case reminds us that when discussing the duration of China-Indian civilizational exchange, we should sometimes look beyond grand narratives such as the transmission of Buddhism by examining regional cultures, popular beliefs, and even the genealogies of deities. This helps add further layers to our understanding of the history of China-India exchanges. Second, it suggests that in studying religious, cultural, and civilization, we must value canonical textual system while also attending to iconographic clues and oral traditions. The integration of textual evidence with fieldwork materials is crucial. Third, it speaks to the necessity of interdisciplinary collaboration among archaeology, philology, folklore studies, religious studies, and historical linguistics, which helps open new windows for observing and understanding. With this story, I hope to illustrate that the exchanges between the Chinese and Indian civilizations and the dialogue between Chinese and Indian knowledge systems extend not merely 2,000 years into the past, but even earlier. I present this case study in the hope of adding a new perspective to the conference. I wish the conference a huge success. Thank you all. Bahut bahut dhanyawad.
With that, we conclude our inaugural session.
我们的开幕式环节到此结束。
India has one of the world's richest and most diverse philosophical traditions, an unbroken dialogue of ideas spanning millennia. Indian philosophy has long sought to understand the nature of the self, truth, and the purpose of knowledge. Its aim is not mere debate, but the realization of truth. As the Rig Veda declares, Ekam Satya Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. Truth is one, the wise expresses it in many ways. With these words, I invite eminent scholar Professor Liu Jian, National Institute of International Strategies, Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Professor Liu is one of China's leading experts on Indian civilization. His work highlights how India's ancient knowledge systems and spiritual traditions continue to nurture dialogue between India and China. The stage is yours, sir.
印度拥有着世界上最丰富、最多元的哲学传统之一，跨越千年的思想对话从未中断。印度哲学长久以来致力于探索自我、真理与知识的本质，其目标并非单纯的辩论，而是实现真理。正如诗歌集离句吠陀中所言：“真理唯一，而智者以不同的方式诠释。”谨以此言，让我们有请中国社会科学院国家全球战略研究院刘建教授发言。刘教授是中国印度文明研究领域的权威学者， 他的工作深刻体现了印度古老知识体系与精神传统如何持续滋养中印对话。有请刘教授。
Namaste, good morning. Respected, Your Excellency, respected Ambassador Rawat, and respected Professor Zhang Baoshen, a senior scholar of Sanskrit studies from the Peking University. We have known each other for more than 40 years, nearly 50 years. Very happy to see him in good health this morning. He is near now 90, but he still can attend a lot of activities, academic, that you have set us a very fine example for us to follow, to work for many years. As the Professor Yu has said that I also do not know Indian philosophy much, but I have come across Indian philosophy and read some books constantly. So that's now my speech. Ancient Indus civilization is the earliest foundation of Indian knowledge system. As is widely known, Indian civilization can be traced back to the period of the Indus Valley civilization, which flourished in the 3rd and early 2nd millenniums BCE. Although the Indus Valley civilization declined somehow, the seeds of civilization had scattered in the subcontinent. As the cradle of one of the most important civilizations in ancient world, the Indus Valley played a great role in the development of human civilization and will be remembered forever as the glory of ancient India. Vedic age further expanded the foundation of Indian knowledge system. That was a day of knowledge explosion, like what during the period of spring and autumn in Chinese history. 中国的战国春秋时期场百家争鸣。And a wide spectrum of knowledge system was formed in a relatively short period of time. Indian philosophy sprouted and started to develop rapidly in the Vedic age, which was mainly embodied in the Vedas, the 4 Vedas, and various Upanishads. Philosophers began to explore the nature and the formation of the universe. The creation hymn in the Rig Veda is well known and has been translated into both English and Chinese. In Chinese, several editions. 创世歌翻成中文有好几个版本。hymn, the 6th and 7th stanzas of the poem at the beginning of Rig Veda. 李居非说这开头就是诗歌。and has been the 6th and 7th stanzas of the poem read as follows. Who really knows? Who will here proclaim it? Whence was it produced? Whence is this creation? The gods came afterwards with the creation of this universe. Who then knows whence it had arisen? Whence this creation has arisen? Perhaps it formed itself, and perhaps it did not. The one who looks down on it in the highest heaven only he knows, or perhaps it does not know. I remember Professor Ji Xianling has written an article about this poem. Also, Professor Huang Xinchuan wrote about this long poem. So this philosophical poem reminds me of a Chinese poem called heavenly questions. That means 天问, asking the sky, asking the heaven about many mysterious questions. And written by Qu Yuan, that in the 4th century to the 3rd century BCE. A philosopher, a poet in the period of warring states in ancient China. He, in his poem, asked nearly 173 questions exactly regarding various natural phenomena, mythology, and history. The first few questions are as follows. From the very beginning of the creation, who has passed down its story? The situation before the heaven and the earth was formed. How can one get to know it clearly? Since the universe was chaotic and one cannot tell the brightness from darkness, who can find out the basic reason? Everything was phenomenally confusing. How can one see their differences? How come that it is bright in daytime and dark at night? Now that the universe has been created because of the unity of yin and yang, what is the phenomenon and what is its evolution? This also sounds like a hymn for creation in Rigveda. 我觉得跟离句吠陀里边的创世歌这两首歌的先文有相似。And the English version is translated by myself. 我把它翻成了英文，是英式翻译。那么 its original sounds rather like this. 那么原文呢，可以读一下，也不长。
Now here I'll read the original Chinese text. 岁古之初，谁传导之? So these pronunciations are just the verse that Professor just recited. 明照蒙暗，谁能解之？同以为象，何以识之？明明暗暗，为是何为？阴阳三合，合本合化。
I think the text itself is now today sounds very hard for modern Chinese to understand clearly. Okay, go on. The two poems put forth some fundamental philosophical questions regarding the origin and creation of the universe and human beings. Our earliest philosophers, when facing the vast and mysterious universe lonely, they were keen to know what had happened to the universe and how would it evolve. Where were human beings from, who they were, and where they would reach. Philosophy therefore began to play a central guiding role in human social activities. Some important concepts were formed, such as ahimsa or nonviolence, which developed into the theory of nonviolence by Mahatma Gandhi in modern times. Nonviolence became a powerful weapon in the struggle of the Indian national independence movement. We in China are very familiar with the concept of ahimsa because of the influence of Buddhism. 不害非暴力这些观念随佛教一道从印度传入中国的一个最重要的一个
So ahimsa was translated from Buddhism into China's non-violence.
In the 5th century to the 4th century BCE, had also put forth similar ideas such as 兼爱，我讲的墨子 or universal love, and 非攻 that means non-attack or no aggressive wars against the neighboring countries. In Taiwan, a well-known scholar who lived up to 103, Zhu Xuan 教授呢 said that heavenly questions might have been influenced by Indian mythology. 数学人研究属实的 that influenced by Indian mythology. And also a certain scholar in China thought that 墨 means ink, dark-skinned. that Moses was an Indian, and the color of his skin was more close to the Indian. However, so far, these arguments have not been universally agreed and have not been proved true. Indian knowledge has never been an entirely self-developed and secluded system, no doubt. The invasion of the Aryans in ancient times and the invasion of Islamic civilization in medieval times had brought about great havoc and various disasters to India. However, some new cultural elements were also added to the original knowledge system in India, enriched and enlivened the time-honored local culture. Jawaharlal Nehru discussed this in Discovery of India, a well-known book of his in China. In modern times, the British colonization and rule in India produced serious consequences, and at the same time promoted the awakening of the consciousness of Indian people as a nation. Modern knowledge and thinking, printing skills, new types of education, and Western culture benefited Indian civilization and advanced the far-reaching Bengal Renaissance movement, a precondition for the victory of the Indian national independence movement. As a major and great civilization in the world, India has a long and unusual history and countless accomplishments in many areas, such as philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, literature and arts, architecture, music, and linguistics. Moreover, as Amartya Sen says, Amartya Sen, India had also achieved considerable success in building a thriving economy with flourishing trade and commerce well before the colonial period. The economic wealth of India was amply acknowledged by British observers, such as the economist Adam Smith. The fact is, in the mid-18th century, India had in many ways fallen well behind what was being achieved in Europe. Was it possible for India to move forward and to become a modern country by herself without the British colonization and rule? This has been a hard nut to crack, a question for scholars to discuss for many years. And opinions differ widely. On the 29th June 2021, Amartya Sen published an article entitled Illusions of Empire, 帝国的幻想, Amartya Sen on what British rule really did for India, on the Guardian, 英国卫报. And this article, in fact, is chapter 10 of his following new book entitled Home in the World, a memoir, published in the same year. Amartya Sen asserted that the country, I mean India, would not have stood still had the British conquest not occurred. At the same time, Sen also confirmed that Britain did indeed serve as India's primary Western contact, particularly in the course of the 19th century. The importance of this influence would be hard to neglect. The indigenous, globalized culture that was slowly emerging in India was deeply indebted not only to British writing, but also to books and articles in other, that is non-English, European languages that became known in India through the British. Sen admitted frankly that indeed India received many wonderful things from Britain that could not come into their own until after independence. Literature in the Indian languages, took some inspirations from English literature, including the following tradition of writing in English in India. I cannot agree more with him because of all his insights. And it seems that Sen has been greatly influenced by Rabindranath Tagore in his attitude toward the positive aspects of the Western civilization. The quintessence of European civilization has broadened and consolidated the foundation of the Indian knowledge system in the sense of modernization or modernity. As two great Asian civilizations, China and India are also fortunately to be close and friendly neighbors. We have had a history of cultural interflow between our two countries for more than 2,000 years. The material and cultural exchange has been a two-way traffic and has benefited the two great peoples. While we are moving steadily towards modernization, our two countries need to strengthen our cooperation in many ways. In more than 10 years in the past, scholars have jointly produced an encyclopedia of China-India cultural contacts in both Chinese and English. 这是过去10几年，2010年以来，中国印度的学者合作呢推出了一部2卷本中印文化交流百科全书，它有中文版，有英文版我很荣幸是这个版本的一个。
I'm honored to be the deputy editor of the collection of the encyclopedia.
Many facts about that Indian knowledge system, about the Indian philosophy, Indian religions. So it has covered the history of the cultural exchange. Andy. Change between China and India, including important figures and events in the history. The two-volume books have illustrated the true relations between our two countries. We have also, in recent years, finished a joint translation program, from which both sides have each translated 25 books of the other side. I think that all these programs will promote better understanding between the two peoples. It is important that there are nearly 3,000 scholars. It is reported that there are nearly 3,000 scholars in China engaged in philosophy work. At least scores of scholars are making studies of Indian philosophy. The conference here today is a wonderful beginning, and we shall make continual efforts to pursue truth, reason, and wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Liu. Continuing our exploration of India's knowledge traditions, we now turn to Dr. Zhu Xuan, Associate Professor at the India Research Center, Shenzhen University. Her research delves into Indian religion, philosophy, and culture, especially the spiritual and intellectual dialogues between India and China.
谢谢刘教授。接下来我们将继续探讨印度的知识传统，有请深圳大学印度研究中心朱璇副教授。他的研究聚焦印度宗教、哲学与文化，尤其关心中印之间的精神与思想对话。
尊敬的大使先生，尊敬的各位在座的老师，法术的老师，
distinguished guests, it's my honor to be here for the symposium. My speech is based on a really important symposium on Sri Aurobindo and Xu Fancheng, held at Shenzhen University on June 28th to 29th of this year. So maybe this topic is not a mainstream topic, but Sri Aurobindo is a really important philosopher, is a really important philosopher in the history of India. His theory is a really unique integrated analysis of vertical and horizontal dimensions. It's a summary of the psychology system of Indian philosophy with his own thought. So this speech is based on my structural and conceptual analysis of his system of the twofold, threefold, and multiple-fold of his dimension, including the static and dynamic structures of his thought. So the first is the vertical structure, the evolution of consciousness. In his book, The Life Divine, he presented an interpretation of the evolutionary and evolutionary principles of consciousness. Mr. Xu Fancheng translated it into Xuan originally entitled Heraclitus. So you can tell from this hierarchy, including the supreme, Satsit, Ananta, the link world, supermind, the triple lower world, pure mind, life force, and matter. And then let's talk about the twofold structure. At the opening of his book, he summarized that matter is a form of veiled life, life is a form of veiled consciousness, and mental consciousness may itself be only a form and a veil of higher states which are beyond mind. And then the vertical triple layer structure, Aurobindo spent a lot of time and chapters in his book to explain Veda. In the Vedic theory, the sky, space, earth parallels his layer mode of pure mental consciousness, life, physical consciousness, and material consciousness. On the left, we can see sky, space, earth, and also the parallel concepts on the right. And then there are three really important concepts: revelation, inspiration, and discrimination. So in Chinese, we are 地势地文分辨. 地势 is the direct approach to truth, and inspiration is the hearing of truth, and discrimination is our understanding or interpretation of truth. And then the Indian philosophy, different deities represent different concepts. For example, Ila, the top god, represents revelation, and then we have Sarasvati, which represents inspiration. Then we have the quadruple layer structure longitudinally. On the right, you can see one more layer, which is the supermind world. And In this layer, we add another layer, smoothie. So now we have the 4 layers represented by 4 goddesses in the Indian history. Ila, Saras, and this 3-layered structure can also be added by supermind world. And in this layer, we have ignorance, general awareness, higher knowledge, and knowledge of truth, showing the exploration of the truth from down to the top. So knowledge of truth is before directly approaching the truth. And then in our Pinto's journal, we discovered a new 4-layered structure. We have purity, liberation, enjoyment, and perfection. And then there is also another 7-layered system. 7 is a really important number in Indian civilization, and you find it cited in other classical books. 7 has really special meaning, so our Pando summarized into the 7-layer world, including Sat, Sit, Anatta, Vijnana, Manas, Prana, and Ana. It's a parallel system of the Yuga system, and every layer is an independent world. So, to summarize his horizontal simple principles, well, actually they could be divided into 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 or infinite layers. It just depends on how you summarize it. So it's a summary of the previous system and also the beginning of a new structure inspired by Bengal Vaishnava school, possessed that the ontological and psychological principles must be understood within a dynamic and static system.
Next part, I'll talk about this horizontal structure, which is a hierarchy for our Pinto's teachings. So in the vertical structure, we see this sequence of each evolution, and Aurobindo borrowed the concept from Brahman about the activity and the stillness. He argued that the contrast between the mobility or activity with stillness is a key feature of the Indian philosophy. From the relations between the activity and the stillness, we can hark to the many binary philosophical concepts such as being and becoming, prakriti and purusha, avidya and vidya, the nirguna Brahman against the saguna Brahman, the aksara against the kisra, etc. So the vertical structures we just saw can be translated to the relations between the activity and the stillness, or as it is put, the ignorance and the knowledge. So the evolution of awareness is to be enlightened from ignorance to knowledge. For Sri Aurobindo, from ignorance to enlightenment is not only about awareness or learning, it is to translate all the thoughts and the knowledge into practices and experience, so that that will facilitate the pursuit to truth. So Aurobindo has integrated the concepts of Vedanta and Tantra, and explain the activity and the stillness in the concept of consciousness and the force. This consciousness and the force structure can play a role in each layer of the structure. He once argued that the cow or cows or cattle represent enlightenment and awareness, whereas asva, the horse, represent the prana or the breath, the energy of life. So that represents the tension, the dynamism of life. And also he made argument about God in the Vedas. And here I come to my conclusions. The teachings of Sri Aurobindo, the psychic structure theories, represent the structure of a cosmos. So the structure of the philosophy mimic the structure of the cosmos. One example is the Samkhya. Maybe the text in the illustration is not at the right place, but Samkhya and the three gunas were understood as in the same layer, but we can understand in terms of Aurobindo's theory from tamas to rajas to sattva. And the second conclusion is this diverse unification of diverse elements. It actually represents the multi-layered structure of our spiritual world. It is not a simple linear relations, but rather a relations characterized by inclusion. So a higher layer should be inclusive of the lower layers, and that unite the awareness realm. In the Indian philosophy, the diversity does not simply mean diverse elements all coexist with each other, but rather there's a hierarchy, there's a vertical structure of inclusion, which facilitated the unification of these layers. My third conclusion is that the psychic structure theory features inclusion and symbolism that deepens our understanding of awareness and consciousness. And he has demonstrated the theory with some more than interpretation. So I believe more in-depth studies on the three Aurobindo theories will help us to further explain the relations between consciousness and the practitioner, and also will help us dig deeper into the Indian philosophy. So much for my presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Zhu. Continue.
谢谢朱教授。
Our next speaker is Ms. Wang Honglin. She is a PhD candidate in religious studies at the University of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, specializing in history of Indian Buddhism and the foundations of Indian philosophical thought.
接下来有请王红琳女士。王女士是中国社会科学院大学哲学院宗教学专业博士研究生，主要研究方向为印度佛教史及印度哲学思想史的基础。
Namaste, good morning. Your Excellency Ambassador Rawat, distinguished scholars, participants in the symposium, good morning. I stand here on behalf of Professor Zhou Guangrong, who is my advisor, to give a presentation about his learnings.
他的研究成果是印度古代宗教中的生
So
教传统。
Professor Zhou specializes in the tradition of Svara Mandala Vainaka in ancient Indian religion. he would like to convey his
那我将从
apologies that he
生教
cannot
之
present
生教之神、生教之理、生教之运这4个方面来
I
展开汇
will
报。
talk about the topic from the perspectives
首先
of
看
the
生教词的
canons,
含义，
the deities,
在
the
于 Swara
principles, and the
Mandala
resonance.
Vainayika
So first,
可以理
the
解为为
Swara
音声而
Mandala
调
Vainayika
伏，以音声教
can
化。
be understood as
在
the
印
teaching
度
through
古代宗教传
sound,
统中，声音并非单
disciplining
纯的
by
感官
hearing.
对象，而
So
是
in
被视为
traditional
通向宇宙本
Indian
源和宗
culture,
教真理的途
sound
径。
is not
自
simply
吠陀时代起
a
呢，婆
perception,
罗门
but
仙人
rather
便将
an
声音
avenue
与
to
创生世
choose.
界的大
So
梵
from
置于同等
the
重要的位置。
Vedic age,
从宗
the
教角度
Brahma
探求其起
sages
源、
have
性质和
placed
功能，
the importance
由此
of
形成了系
sound
统而细腻的
at
声教
the
体
same
系。
level
那这一
with
体
the
系在不
Brahman,
同的历史阶段
which is the
进
creator
一步
of
发
the
展，并且
universe.
随着佛教等宗
Such
教的传播，
understanding
对南亚、
evolved in
东南亚乃
history
至
and
东亚的宗教语
disseminated
言产
from
生了深
India
远影
with
响。
Buddhism
这张图
to
是
have
以一棵
impact
经
on
典之
South
树的
Asia,
形象，
Southeast Asia,
展示
Central
了
Asia,
印
and
度古
East
代宗教
Asia.
的典
Here
籍
you
体
can
系。
see a graph of a
那么我
tree
们可
which
以
shows
看到
the
树根象
structure
征着
of
神
the
圣智慧是
traditional
一切经典
Indian
的源泉。
religious
然后树干部分呢，从下到上的两部分
Here
分
the
别象征
root is
天
the
启
Brahma,
和
and
传
on
承的
the
两大体
trunk
系。
you see the divine wisdom and the
那
Shrutis.
天启也就是这个史鲁底，它是由这个动词词根实录派生而来，然后意思就是所听闻，那就表明这些经典的内容是对于天启
So the
原始记
divine
录。
wisdom
那么
is
这部分
a
呢是具有不
recording
可争议
of
的权威性的。
what
然后我
is
们看到
heard
这
from
个
the
左侧
divine
支就是与
instructions.
吠陀相关的根本
On
经
the
典，
left, you
包
can see
括
the
吠陀、
classicals
复吠陀等
related
等。
to Vedas,
那
including
么诠
the
释吠陀经典的梵书、森林书和奥义书呢，也是被归为天启
Vedas
经的。
and
那右
Atharvas,
侧的这个
etc.
右侧
On the
支
right,
就是右下角这
you
部
can
分，
see
是吠陀支，
this
就包
branch,
括的
lower
是
branch
语
on
法、
the
语
right
音、诗律、
is the
词源、
Vandanga,
仪轨、天文
including
这
Vyakaran,
六学，
Shiksha,
构成的是吠
which
陀
means
学术的
grammar
系统支撑。
pronunciation,
那再往
Gant,
上看呢是这
Jyotish,
个
Nirukta, and
顶部
Hom.
的树冠，它就是传承文
Means
献，
like
包括往事
metrology
书、
and
法论、达特
astronomy.
罗等等，是天启文献的
Here
这个思想的分化。
you
可
see
见呢，这棵
the
经典之树就像是一个声音之树，那它的根本呢就在于吠陀的声教
what is
传统。
heard, represent the sound.
因此，我的老师
It
列
has
举
its
了
root
中国
in
的
the
四部分
sound
类法，
tradition of the
将
Vedic
古代的
system.
印度宗教经典归纳为
So
吠
Mr.
陀部、
Zhou
史传部、经部
summarized
和达特罗部。
categorized
吠陀部
the
包括
Veda
吠陀本集和
classicals
相应的经典，
in the
以吟诵
four
对话为主，构成了印
categories,
度宗教最古老的声教核心。史诗
including
部史传部包括的是两大史诗和往事书，
Veda and
语言呢转向叙事。
the Puranas.
然后经部呢是包括六派哲学的根本经典及相应的著书，还有佛教三藏、耆那教等这个显教
And
经典。
also the classicals of Vijayana.
那个经部的这些典籍呢，它的哲理思辨也逐渐丰富。
You see
最后一个部分是达特罗部，也包
also
括
the
湿
Sutra,
婆派、毗湿奴派、性力派等等根本经典，
Tantra,
还有秘密佛教的经典以及耆那教的秘密经典。
as well as some
那这部分
secret
呢，与被重
classicals
视
of the
世
Jina
间多
religion.
门。在所有的经典之中，吠陀本集可
So
以说
in
是
all
奠定
these
了声教传统
classicals,
的
the
根基。
Vedic
从其
Samhita
内容和形式来看
laid
呢
the
印
foundation
度最早的
of
宗教活动正是以
the
音声
sound
为核
doctrines
心
or
媒
the
介。
Svara Mandala Vainayika. So we understand that sound is the key
在吠陀
medium
时代，
for the
关于
traditional
声音
Indian
的研究已形成
religions.
独立学科。
And during
那
the
其中
Vedic
体现
times,
在这
there
个
was already
六吠陀
a
之首
sonic
的这个
doctrine,
Shiksha
which
和
is represented in Siksha and the
这
Pradisakya.
个视差论呢，它讨论的是与
The
语音有关的问题。
examines
然后
topics
这个
about
对知论呢则更进一步，把诵读实践和理论分析结合，来归纳语音变化规律，尤其重视的是 连声音变。
pattern of the phonetic changes,
在词
including
源语一方
declensions,
面呢，
etc.
有这个尼鲁格达，这个
For
是给吠
semantics,
陀
there is
的
Nirukta,
词汇集，
which
尼
is
堪堵所做的这个注释。
a
那它系统地解
commentary
释了
to
吠陀
the
语言中词义
vocabulary
的来
of
源
the
与演变。
Vedas, which explains the
下边这
semantics
句是这
and
个
the
佛教居
source
舍论中
of
也引用了其
the
内容。
words in the Vedas.
就是这个遗六多论记说，
Here you
炎方地
see
光牛金刚眼
the
天水于此九中义，智人说取名。它
Vasubantu
意思
notes
是，如果
in
说
the
讨论的人已经在
Abhyudayakosa,
某个意义上达成了共识，就是规定了某个词的用法，比如他举了这个渠的这
use
个
of
渠这个
a
词，可以
certain
指代这
word
个
is
地
determined
光牛
already.
金刚眼天和
For
水等
example,
9种意
the
思。
sound
那大家就
chu
按照这种
can
既定
refer
的
to
约定
the
来理解，
meanings
就不
of
必
the
再
speech,
争论
direction,
它本来的词
light,
义。
cow, etc. Then the semantics of this word is determined
掺大词
already.
是
There shouldn't
探
be
讨
further
吠陀诗
debate
律的
on
经
that.
典。吠
I
陀
think
赞
we
歌
have
呢，大多是
Chandas.
以
Chandas
韵
is the
文写成，
classical
每一首
treatise
都有
on
严格的音节
the
节拍和
Vedic
停顿规则。
prosody. It is organized in
歌者奥义
rhymes.
书中也指出，应该追求诗律，按照诗
In
律赞颂，
the
应该
Rigveda,
追求颂诗格
it
式，
argues
按照
that
颂诗格
it
式来
should
赞颂。
be chanted in
维尔嘎勒呢
rhythm
被
in
称
the
为是
given
吠陀中的
pattern.
吠陀，可见语法的重要性。那它
Viragata
的起源是和
is
祭祀仪轨密切相
considered
关的。
as the Veda within the Veda.
那对这一点的
It
这个分析，
originated
由于时
from
间关系，
the
不在此详细
rituals
展开了。我们可以从这个它的词根来看出来，就是这
So
个
we can see from
这个
the
语法的重要性。然后
word, the spelling of the word, we
在六吠
understand
陀支之外
that
呢，
the
还有被
grammar
称
is
为
important in
副吠陀
the
支的
Veda.
文献体系。那其中呢是以
Apart
前塔
from
婆论
the proper Veda,
最具代表性
there
的
are。some
它是附属于梭摩吠陀，那主要论述的是音乐
Vedas
和
or
舞蹈等内
Yupa
容。
Vedas,
除此之外呢，与
like
音乐相关的古老文献还有这个
Khanda
舞
Parana
论，然后
is more
达杜
about
朗、
music and the dancing.
乐宝论和乐经论等
Also,
等。
we
那舞论中
have
与语言和音乐相关的内容也展示了古印度宗教传统
Natya
从宗教仪式向艺术表达延伸的典型形态。
treatises which
第二部分呢
examines the
是宗
different
教之神，就
forms
是
of art.
主要内容是关于
In
声
my
音
second
如何
part,
被
I would
人
like
格
to
化和
talk
神
about
圣
the
化。
deities
那
of
在印度古代宗教中，声音
the
不仅是
Sabda
沟通神人的
Sastra
媒介，也被
that would
人格化为
explain
神
why
奇。
the
这个最著名的是这个
are
我们知道这
considered
个语言女神
deities.
瓦格，它就是圣教
we
传统
know
的核
that
心象征。
Vak is the goddess of our language, and she is a key symbol
然后
for
这张图
the
呢，这个字可能有些不清楚，然后我可以给大家翻译一下最上面的一句话，他说的是与神佩戴由51个字母组成的花环，就是下边的这个
which says that the
51个圈。
goddess
然后
wears the
这些
wreath
字母呢象
that
征
is
智慧之
composed
意，
of
每一个上边都刻有一个字母。
alphabets, 51
那这个母
letters,
神呢有许多名字，
each
其中之
bead
一呢
is
是咖喱。然后它
carved
下边这里
with
列了8个
a
名字，然后
letter.
这8个名字
Here
也
you
都
see
是
the 8 names
这个
of the
与这些
Kali,
字母相关
the
的女神。
goddess.
然后从梵书时期呢
And from the
萨达斯曼蒂
period
就完成了由
of
自然之和神向知识与语言女神的转变。
from the Brahmanas onward, we see this language
刚
goddess
刚提到的3位
started
语
to
言相
take
关的都是
shape.
女神。那在圣教传统中，
I
还有一位
mentioned
这
the
个
three
湿婆，
goddess
她不仅是武王与乐神，也是被视为一生之源。
and there is
那
a
据
Shiva
说，
who
语
is
法学家
the
波里尼
master
正是从
of
湿
the
婆那里
music.
得到了14条音声法则，
It is said that the
就
Burini
是大自在天经，
master linguist
然后成为这个梵语语音学与波尼尼语法体系的根本依据。
and
那
that
这
laid
个
the
经文内
foundation
容呢，据说就
of
是
the
湿婆舞
Burini
蹈的时候从他的这个手鼓中迸发出的声音。
and it is said that the sound was given
第
from
3部
the
分呢是
drum
声教
of
之语，
Shiva.
关于这个声音本质和
In my
语
third part,
言
I will
解
talk
脱的
about the
哲学论证。
principles of Sabda.
在古印度语言思想中呢，这个言语跟声音是被赋予了很多个名称和层次的。我们可以看到右边这张图，这个刊图中收录了57个与这个话的同义或者相关的词汇。那么这个各个话可能现在是这个比较常用的。
And I highlighted 6 which are commonly used today in red. Represents the detailed categorization of sounds in India. Second is the sound essence. There's a concept called Sabda Brahman. It's a basic concept.
它这个就是相当于是，把这个，在这个弥勒奥义书中呢，区分了2种范，一种是这个声，一种是无声。那么他认为呢，应该一声一显无声。
and categorized into 2 Brahmas, sound and non-sound. And Om is a sound. At the same time, it's also a way for you to practice spiritually. And in the Upanishads, Sabda Brahman, the sound Om, is merely a means or path to Brahman. Later in the Shiva Purana, Sabda Brahman is regarded as the origin of creation. Sound nature is also a really interesting topic in the system. It's a question whether the sound is eternal or non-eternal. In ancient India, grammar study is not only a way for us to study speech, but a way for us to approach truth.
在印度宗教修行体系中，音声瑜伽也是一种将声教理论落实实践的重要方式。
It's a practice to combine sound system with body physical practice.
在认识论层面呢，正理派与圣论派他们是这个否定声场之论的。
Actually, according to the Jnana and Vaisesika schools, impermanent sound theory is considered impermanent.
因此这个声音它从宗教的创生原理呢，转化为一种认识论的范畴。在这里，在这方面呢，成为
and meaning have a conventional provisional relationship.
那在接下来的佛教哲学中呢，这个就是与声音相关的就是这个五明体系中的声明。那声明就相当于是语言学和逻辑学。瑜伽师地论中这里说的声明术略有6项，分别阐释的就是语言在这个
Yoga Kara Bhumi Sastra Chapter 15. How is the field of verbal science established? The question has been discussed. And then the last part is the resonance of Sabda. It's a study of the legacy in Chinese Buddhism. So first, it has been inherited through Sanskrit sound syllable system. For example, the 14 sounds in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra in chapter 8. So we can tell that the system has been inherited not only phonetically, but it's also a way, a medium to inherit legacy of Buddhism and other schools of Indian thoughts. And same with the Gandhara Kharosthi script system. And each alphabet has a very special meaning. And this is the ritual practice of the letter circle yoga. So to
首先
summarize,
呢，古代印度宗教的声教是
the
源远流
Sabda
长的，它
tradition
发端
of
于吠
Asian
陀
Indian
时代，
religions
以
has
斯
a
夫
long
吠陀
and
及其
continuous
夫主典
history.
籍为根本。
It
并在
originated
吠
in
陀
the
之和
Vedic
付吠陀
period
中，
with the
从
four
言
Vedas
语、
and their
音乐两部类，
ancillary
这
texts
个
as
之
foundation
中有
with
其中
the
的
Vedic
启示与传
branches
承。
and
那这种传统呢，发端于宗
Sakyas.
教，
The
依
tradition
附于
is
宗教，
transmitted
有
and
显著的
exemplified
宗
through
教
two
因子。
primary domains,
第二点
language and
呢，以
music.
大乘佛教为主
This
体的北
tradition
传佛教，
originates from
很好
religion,
的
is
保留
dependent
和吸
upon
收了印
religion.
度教中的声教
Second,
传统，
Northern
其常
Buddhism,
富有
primarily
佛教特色
represented
的佛教
by
理论观念，
Mahayana, has
进而对
effectively
东亚地
preserved
区
and
比如
absorbed
中国的
the
这个
Sabda
汉语
tradition
藏
from
蒙回等
Hinduism,
等，还
forming
有
a
日本、朝鲜
distinctly
产生
Buddhist
这个程度不一
conception
的
of
影响。
language. This influence
那
extended to
以
East
上就
Asia,
是我的
including
汇报，
Chinese
谢谢
Han,
大家。
Tibetan, Mongolia, Uyghur religions, as well as Japan and Korea. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wang. We now come to a brief felicitation ceremony to honor our distinguished speakers. May I request Ambassador Shri Pradeep Kumar Rawat to kindly come to the stage to present mementos as a token of appreciation.
谢谢王女士。现在我们将举行简短的颁奖仪式，以向各位演讲嘉宾致以谢意。让我们有请印度驻华大使罗国栋先生上台颁奖。首先有请深圳大学印度研究中心主任玉龙玉教授上台。接下来有请中国社会科学院国家全球战略研究院刘建教授。有请深圳大学印度研究中心朱璇副教授。最后有请中国社会科学院大学哲学院王鸿琳女士。
I request all three speakers to kindly remain on stage for a group photograph.
请各位嘉宾与大使合影留念。
Thank you very much.